Welcome to Fortune Forecasts. I am your hostess, Daisy Raisler. You've been joining me as I've been narrating the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science by Thomas Troward, 1909. In our last chapter, the author took us through a very intense explanation of the soul. And for me, the question itself, who is the source of all power? And I really liked how he explained that we take all of this truth into our life based on our conception of God, whether it would be positive or negative. And then he talks about how the intuition is related to our imagination, and then that there are, as he's mentioned many times through this chapter, through this book, correspondences. But he mentioned specifically in regards to the soul that there are physiological correspondences in the circular of molecular vibrations. And he went through a very detailed process about that. And how all of that moves through the physical channel of the objective mind and then returns through the sympathetic system, the physical channel of the subjective mind, and from there it completes a full circuit. And again, talked about how important it is to be a good guardian of our thoughts, as this correspondence had very similarities in that it has the power of the all-originating spirit. So, are you ready now for chapter 16? This will be interesting as we dive into our last chapter together. So, relax and let's get started. This book is in the public domain in the United States. Chapter 16, The Spirit. What must the supreme all-originating spirit be in itself? That is the question before us. Let us start with one fact regarding it about which we cannot have any possible doubt. It is creative. If it were not creative, nothing could come into existence. Therefore, we know that its purpose or law of tendency must be to bring individual lives into existence and to surround them with a suitable environment. Now, a power which has this for its inherent nature must be a kindly power. The spirit of life seeking expression in individual lives can have no other intention towards them than that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. To suppose the opposite would be a contradiction in terms. It would be to suppose the eternal principle of life acting against itself, expressing itself as the reverse of what it is, in which case it would not be expressing itself, but expressing its opposite. So that's impossible to conceive of the spirit of life acting otherwise than to the increase of life. This is as yet only imperfectly apparently by reason of our imperfect apprehension of the position and our consequent want of conscious unity with the one eternal life. As our consciousness of unity becomes more perfect, so will the life-givingness of the Spirit become more apparent. But in the realm of principles, the pure affirmative and life-giving nature of the all-originating Spirit is unavoidable conclusion. Now, by what name can we call such an inherent desire to add to the fullness of an individual life? That is, to make it stronger, brighter, and happier? If this is not love, then I do not know what else it is. And so we are philosophically led to the conclusion that love is the prime moving power of creating spirit. But expression is impossible without form. What form, then, should love give to the vehicles of its expression? By the hypothesis of the case, it could not find self-expression in forms that were hateful or repugnant to it. Therefore, the only logical correlative of love is beauty. Beauty is not yet universally manifested for the same reason that life is not, namely, lack of recognition of its principle. But the principle of beauty is inherent in the eternal mind, is demonstrated by all that is beautiful in the world in which we live. These considerations show us that the inherent nature of the spirit must consist in the eternal interaction of love and beauty as the active and passive polarity of being. Then this is the power for the working of which our soul faculties are specifically adapted. And when this purpose of the adaptation is recognized, we begin to get some insight into the way in which our intuition, imagination, and will should be exercised. By training our thought to habitually dwell upon this dual unity of the originating forces of love and beauty, the intuition is rendered and more sensitive to ideas emanating from this supreme source. And the imagining faculty is trained in the formation of images corresponding to such ideas. While on the physical side, the molecular structure of the brain and the body becomes more and more perfectly adjusted to the generating of vibratory currents, tending to the outward manifestation of the originating principle. Thus the whole man is brought into unison with himself and with the supreme source of life, so that, in the words of St. Paul, he is being day by day renewed after the image of him that created him. Our more immediately personal recognition of the all-originating love and beauty will thus flow out as peace of mind, health of body, discretion in the management of our affairs, and power in the carrying out of undertakings. And as we advance to a wider conception of the working of the spirit of love and beauty in its infinite possibilities, so our intuition will find a wider scope and our field of activity will expand along with it. In a word, we shall discover that our individuality is growing and that we are becoming more truly ourselves than we ever were before. The question of the specific lines on which the individual may be mostly perfectly trained into such recognition of his true relation to the all-embracing spirit of life is therefore of supreme importance. But it is also of such magnitude that even to briefly sketch its broad outlines would require a volume to itself, and I will therefore not attempt to enter upon it here. My present purpose being only to offer some hints of the principles underlying that wonderful threefold unity of body, soul, and spirit, which we all know ourselves to be. We are as yet only at the commencement of the path which leads to the realization of this unity in the full development of all its powers. But others have trodden the way before us, from whose experiences we may learn, and not least among these was the illustrious founder of the most Christian fraternity of the Rosicrucians. This master mind, setting out in his youth with the intention of going to Jerusalem, changed the order of his journey and first sojourned for 3 years in the symbolical city of Damcar, in the mystical country of Arabia. Then for about a year in the mystical country of Egypt, and then for 2 years in the mystical country of Fez. Then having during these 6 years learned all that was to be acquired in those countries, he returned to his native land of Germany, where on the basis of the knowledge he had just gained, he founded the fraternity R.C., for whose instructions he wrote the mystical books M and T. Then, when he realized that his work in its present stage was accomplished, he of his own free will laid aside the physical body. Not, it is recorded, by decay or disease or ordinary death, by the express direction of the Spirit of Life, summing up all his knowledge in the words, Jesus mihi omnia. And now his followers await the coming of the artist Elias, who shall bring the magnum opus to its completion. Let him that readeth understand. And that concludes the end of chapter 16 and the end of my narration and conclusion of all 16 chapters in the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science by Thomas Troward. Till the next adventure.